limiting, if you suggest that this is the only way to achieve this desired end, because that's what we've been trained on, and we've been trained to this narrow view, you are in a way stifling innovation or alternate suggestions. So I think that applies across the professions, that you cannot oversimplify a problem.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining again for a conversation relative to the 21st century engineer. We've covered a lot of different topics, and one that I think is extremely important for anybody in the practice of this profession or the ancillary fields related to civil infrastructure is ethics, and how ethics plays into everything from decision constructs to performance. That in and of itself is complex enough, but the intervention of autonomous vehicles, artificial intelligence, big data, and all of the engineers' roles in all these different activities is becoming quite significant. And the National Council of Examiners for Engineers Surveyors has put together a draft position statement on the ethical responsibilities of engineers, which they'll be voting on this summer. And so I think it's quite timely for us to have a conversation. For that reason, I've asked a longtime friend of mine, Ms. Tara Hoke, who's with us today. Tara has a vast knowledge, vast experience, and she's published in the area of ethics. She publishes routinely in Civil Engineering Magazine, the ASCE publication. And as a result, I've asked Tara to spend a few moments and share a few thoughts with us. Tara, thank you for taking the time to be with us. I ask you to spend just a few minutes to outline or frame up your background and let the visitors that are with us today to understand where you're coming from.
Sounds great. Dennis, thank you for inviting me. I appreciate having the opportunity to do this. This is my first time doing a podcast, so bear with me if I'm awkward. Thank you. So I am ASCE's in-house attorney. I am unfortunately not an engineer by trade or education, but I am a lawyer. And one of the most significant pieces of my responsibility at ASCE is that I am the ethics counsel, ethics staff liaison. As you mentioned, Dennis, one of the things that I've been doing, and I've been in that role roughly for about almost 20 years now, actually. Mm-hmm. I started off, I know, hard to believe, it doesn't feel like that long.
You started when you were 3 years old.
Exactly. I was a very precocious kid. Yeah. So I've been writing articles, a case study, basically analysis in the Civil Engineering Magazine, which is the magazine for ASCE members. And from there, my role has kind of expanded. We have, I believe, 2 different committees that have ethics as a major part of their role. Our investigative committee and what we'll call our educational ethics committee. So I support those two committees. And I also from time to time get invited to do ethics webinars, presentations for our members and for other engineering professionals. So it's, I would say one of the most rewarding pieces of my job is to be involved in engineering ethics, both because it gives me a chance to interact with the engineers who are doing this stuff day to day, and also just to engage in really thoughtful discussions like this about engineering ethics. So thank you again for having me.
Oh, no. Again, thank you for agreeing to do this. I appreciate you taking time out of the day to share your thoughts and perspectives. And as you've said, and for those listening, you are a wealth of knowledge on the issues of ethics, even though you're a lawyer. And that'll be the last lawyer that I'll throw out, I promise. But no, in all seriousness, I've heard your presentations at the conferences, and if anybody listening has an opportunity to go to the ASCE conferences where you're speaking, I strongly advocate for them to attend. You're interactive, you're engaging, you're informed, and irrespective of your background, not a barb, you have an engineer's perspective on the application of our profession in a societally responsible way. And that's little less, as in our responsibility to the health, safety, and welfare of the public, which, of course, is our credo. So stepping off, we're going to kind of focus on AI today. And for those of you who don't get Civil Engineering Magazine, I advocate you go buy a copy or get a copy, or even better, join ASCE. But the most recent publication of Civil Engineering had a very interesting article in it. I find it very informative, very interesting, and I'd kind of like to drill down on AI in the architectural engineering construction profession for a little while. And to that, I'm interested in what you're seeing as terms of the proliferation of AI and AI powered systems in the engineering workplace today.
Well, thanks, Dennis. Yeah, well, it's almost hard to it's a little hard to separate sometimes the hype from the reality, but I definitely think it's not an exaggeration to say it's starting to touch on every piece of, or it has implications that could touch on the piece of everything, everything that an engineer does, from the very basics of drafting emails or writing reports, through project and contract management, and into, even the technical aspects of it. So whether it's predicting failures, or modeling, very comprehensive modeling, or I think it goes without. I don't think it's too much of an exaggeration to say the possibilities are endless, and engineering is and all professions are starting to grapple with the appropriate role for AI, improving the state of practice, but also governing and making wise decisions about their use in the practice.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, ironically, I just did a presentation at the Southern Zone NCWS meeting on AI and some of its applications. And the punchline of the presentation was that the presentation was actually done using AI. In fact, my first, second, and third efforts at getting it done was a matter of loading it into AI and say, "This is what I want." No, that is not what I want. This is what I want, and that interactive responsibility. A lot of people think of AI as something mysterious. Of course, it isn't. It's just a computer program. The difference is that the database it relies on to answer questions is somewhat autonomous from the engineer. Whereas historically, if you're doing building information management, another AI kind of system, the engineer provides the information. If you're doing logistics, if you're doing CAD, again, the engineer is providing the data. But now we're more and more relying on the AI to provide its own data, and now it becomes even more critical for the engineer to look at what is being told, and validating, ground truthing it, checking it in whatever regard. Of course, there's still the desire and responsibility to provide that. In the article, you talked a little bit about IBM's Watson, and I'd actually almost forgotten about that whole Watson thing. It was, what, 11 years ago, 12 years ago, something in that time frame. And the case study that you shared really was an interesting one. I mean, it's really kind of a potential and failure process. I'd like you to share, if you will, what you saw, what you read. I know you did a lot of research behind it in terms of what you saw and what they saw as the potential for Watson as an AI to impact the healthcare industry.
So I'll start with just talking about, it is a very fascinating case. And when I found it, I thought, even though it's not an engineering case study, it has tremendous implications and tremendous applications to what engineering ethics and how engineers are going to engage with it. I'll say, the Watson for Oncology, and I went into a little bit of a detour and talked about Watson in 2011 and beating some of the best human champions of Jeopardy. And so it really demonstrated that that this platform had amazing capabilities to predict answers, to search tremendous amounts of data, and then come up with what they felt was the most plausible or optimal answer. And so from there, IBM, high off that success, decides to launch into probably one of the most lucrative and maybe complex industries in the world. And it sold the idea of this platform as something that was going to revolutionize cancer treatments. It was going to be loaded with, insane amounts of patient data, and every medical journal or write-up that it could possibly lay its hands on. And in so doing, it would have this capability for people to improve their diagnostic and treatment capabilities. So it was going to make these predictions based on the data that would help people manage cases in the future and do it better and have better outcomes. So that really was the initiation. And I don't know how much, I don't have to have a dialogue you want to have on this, but that was the promise. Whether they actually delivered that is what made this an interesting article from an ethics standpoint.
Well, and it is the framework for the promise is the way I would put it. The opportunity, I think, was bounded by really two things. Maybe a little bit of over optimism. You used the term earlier, a little bit too much hype.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to be better than anybody because we're doing something nobody else is doing, and it's easy to hype that. But there was also the practicality, the reality of what Watson in that case could do in terms of accessing the data and making judgments. And we are talking about, I guess the best analogy I could give you is that, we certainly wouldn't send people up into space today using a 64-bit processor or something with a 64K RAM. But we sent people to the moon with that kind of technology. And of course, we're advanced significantly, and those advances provide additional opportunities. The difficulty that Watson had, as I understand it, was, again, the fact that they just couldn't figure out a way to get all of that data in a format that it could access and digest. Is that fair to say?
That's definitely the heart of it. It seemed like, as I understand it myself, Watson was most successful when it came to hard numbers. So, patient testing and lab results. But so much of a patient records are things that are doctor's notes or discharge reports or just sort of written and because of that, and the language was maybe inconsistent from place to place, or maybe the data lived in different. For everybody who lives in a company where data grows, where our computer use grows sort of organically, you have multiple systems that don't talk to each other, and so I think they struggled. It very quickly became obvious to IBM and to the Watson team that they were struggling to develop complete records. They were missing pieces, either just they couldn't get it or they couldn't translate it, and so they were finding that these patient records weren't having as much value or adding as much to the training of the system as they thought was possible.
And that really relates to our life in general. The crux of the problem was the human component didn't subscribe to a uniform format, and computational systems, at least 14 years ago, 10 years ago, really required that rigidity of the data. Always had. Building data in arrays, data being something that could be put into bytes and bits and clearly, discretely organized. And a scrawled note in doctor's handwriting on a piece of paper doesn't actually translate. I don't even know how they translate it into a prescription at the pharmacy.
Correct.
So to ask an AI to do that seems a bit much. I'm just wondering, with all that you do and all that you observe in the engineering community, have you observed any parallels to that kind of thing? Or do you think that engineering, by and large, I know we have codes, and I rail against codes. I always consider codes the minimum standard of performance and the expectation for us to move beyond them. But have you drawn, or do you see any parallels, or for that matter, differences between the medical profession and where we are in the engineering profession as far as AI?
No, I don't. I do see a lot of similarities. I think some of the concerns that I've seen when they talk about AI with things like, again, diagnostics or analyses, is again that question of documentation. Again, you're relying on individual projects or individual outcomes to have adequate documentation so that you can pull, extract the actual value from a project if you're going to use that as a data point to solve future problems. So there's that same human element of we don't all think the same, and we don't all record things the same and use the same language. And so how you synthesize that when you're putting it into a program that's going to try to be globally useful, is a problem for us also.
Outstanding. Now, in the spirit of full disclosure,
Mm-hmm.
when I first went on the faculty back in the dark ages, as the dinosaurs were still roaming the planet, and
Mm-hmm.
we had discovered dirt the next year, and we classified it as soil the year after that. Give you a perspective how long ago we were actually working on a pseudo AI computer program that actually designed water and wastewater treatment plants, and that program, we were working for EPA,
Mm-hmm.
and that program really struggled to take into consideration that if I was a design engineer, I might solve a problem a completely different way than somebody else would. So it wasn't just the fact that we had different data; we had the same
Mm-hmm.
data. It's just there's a multiplicity of ways in engineering to, for the cat lovers, skin the cat. And so to expect AI to solve that or analyze
Mm-hmm.
that or not recognize that, I think is asking an awful lot. I want to
Absolutely.
take you back to the Watson issue. We didn't drill down as far. I want to go just a little bit further because I think this is really the most important lesson learned. It's, I think, the lesson that engineers need to take to heart for the reasons we've just said: the
Mm-hmm.
diversity, the diversity of opinion, the nature of the data that we deal with, the alternatives that we have in solving a singular problem, let
Mm-hmm.
alone multiplicity or complex problems we have to deal with in civil infrastructure, and that's simplification.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in the case of Watson, as I understand it, for the reasons you said, we've got all this data, but we just can't seem to be able to crack the nut on it. Could you elaborate a little bit on what the researchers did in that particular case to try and get around their data management problem?
Absolutely. So again, they were struggling to train this data because this tool because of the problems with the data. So what IBM ended up doing, and they had contracted with a large and reputable hospital in the U.S.
Good. You
to
didn't
do the
mention the name.
training. Yes, without yes, discreetly, yes, we'll say just large and successful
Large and
hospital.
reputable. Yeah.
Yes.
So they stay that way.
Right, exactly, and still are. Yes, but and since they weren't successful in finding actual patient data, unfortunately, they made a decision to start synthesizing patient data. So they would put together a plausible patient scenario with a complete record, and then they would diagnose. I'm making air quotes, diagnose for my audio listeners, diagnose the problem that they had created with their synthesized data. And and that was to some extent adequate for the for I guess to the extent that it served their need for the moment, but it obviously led to downstream problems because at the end of the day, as you said, these are simplified. These are representing the viewpoints of a specific small group of professionals about a specific, carefully tailored kind of case, and that
Yeah. Yeah. The advantage was that you have this plethora of data and they filtered it down to the point where it really became the expertise of a few.
right.
And so that the promise, the hype, if you
Mm-hmm.
will, was that we can take the collective wisdom of an international global profession and bring it to bear to solve a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, they were forced, my words,
Mm-hmm.
presumably, into simplifying it down to, or really just what the opinion of a small group of certainly learned professionals had,
Mm-hmm.
but it didn't take that global knowledge. It didn't prove to be, didn't live up to hype. Just
Absolutely.
in effect, and in fact, they proved that it could work, but the technology, and I don't lay it off on anything other than the technology just wasn't at a point where they understood how to deal with big data. We do today. Machine language, uh, supervised and unsupervised machine language is
Mm-hmm.
something that's out there. Is doable. Uh, I will admit, ironically, that I find most of the AI loves the generative format when it comes to narrative,
Mm-hmm.
because there's a whole lot of narrative in the global universe. Ask it to do a math problem, and better grab your own calculator and verify it. But
Agree.
it's coming.
Mm-hmm.
It'll get there. Going to that failure though, and I'm going to drag you back into the engineering
Mhm.
universe for a second.
Mhm.
Can you envision there being similar errors, similar problems? Part A and Part B. You know
Mhm.
me; it's a multiple choice quiz. Part B is: do you think the issue that engineers need to be aware of, and therefore be prepared to counteract or protect themselves from,
Mhm.
is the pressure of performing, the hype,
Mhm.
living up to expectations when those expectations aren't realistic?
Yeah, those are two really good questions. Yeah. So the first
You're welcome.
question, yeah, the first question you already somewhat alluded to yourself, which is that um, you know somebody may be tremendously gifted as an engineer and an authority, and yet somebody else may have an equally valid way of getting at an answer that is completely different from that person. And so you very much limit. It's almost the opposite of the hype, because it's limiting. If you suggest that this is the only way to achieve this desired end, because that's what we've been trained on, and we've been trained to this narrow view, you are in a way stifling innovation or alternate suggestions. So I think that applies across the professions, that you cannot oversimplify a problem, because and again, that's the point of AI. At least we hope that that will be the dream of AI, is that we are going to represent all of these options and maybe be a forum for creative solutions. So that was your first question, I believe, and
Correct.
I think that's
Absolutely.
certainly applications. And your second question, I've now forgotten. Is
It's okay. I haven't.
apologize.
Sorry. You might have hoped I forgot it, but I didn't. It's the
Hard.
pressure we find ourselves under when we maybe overpromise and underdeliver, or the fear
Mhm.
of underdelivering, or the fact that we become maybe a little too reliant on AI to help us deliver unique solutions, only to find out it's leaving us short, and
Mhm.
maybe we can't. So
I mean, it's not a unique issue. Thank you. Yeah, it's not a unique issue for engineering ethics as a whole, for or for it's for new technologies as a whole, or any technology. Engineers who are pressured to create a result, or to find a result, or to get an answer, there is that tremendous temptation to take a shortcut. So this is a scenario here where they felt that constraint to get this product on the market, and they took a shortcut. An engineer who might have used something like that might also feel that same constraint. Maybe I haven't done my diligence to know how, to know where this data is coming from, and to know how much weight I should put on the results that I'm getting, because I also feel this constraint to
absolutely.
get something out there. So it's not just the pressures in the creation of the project, but also or of the product, but also in the usage. If you don't know what you're using, and your answer is, I just need to get something out the door, how confident are you in the results, and how much diligent have you taken, or how much knowledge do you have of how much reliance you can place on something like this.
That's great. Well put, and I couldn't agree more. Again, going back, referencing briefly the conversation I had just this past week. The one of the things that we do is, as engineers, particularly in the civil world, is we build in a contingency fund on our projects to address those things that we maybe missed, but more likely screwed up on. And I say that having built contingencies in on my projects, but
Mhm.
but the level of contingency, the level of a mistake, is something that maybe AI can help us with. But of course, we still have to validate the accuracy of the information we're getting, or we're just going to screw up faster. Uh, or maybe more in a more grandiose way, neither of which we want. Uh, but there's an opportunity, but there's also a reality. We have to validate and check and move for sure that that what we're relying on, whether it be a calculator, or a CAD system, or big data, or AI, that
Mhm.
it's working the way we want it to work, where we expect it to work, which is now going to take us over into really the next realm of questions I want to kind of dump on you, and bring us back really to the ethical issues. Now that we have
Mhm.
a conversation about the dangers that we fall into, or that are being presented to us,
Mhm.
and recognizing that everybody, you, I, all the engineers, all the people that are listening to us right now, are using AI, whether they admit it or recognize it or not. It is part of their lives in some capacity. whether they're doing a Google search or whether they're having their iPhone calculate the distance between or the best route to take between where they are and where they're headed. This is all AI at the end of the day. So, as professionals, people working with the credo of protecting the health, safety, and welfare of the public, how do you think we need to go about? What do we need to do to assure that the tools that we're using aren't leading us astray?
Mhm. So, if you'll allow me to plug ASCE's Code of Ethics, I will note that
Of
one of
course.
our sections. Thank you. One of our provisions in the code says that engineers should consider the capabilities, limitations, and implications of new technologies. So it's not specific to AI, but
Right.
certainly in this case, um, capabilities means you can't ignore the fact that there are new technologies out there that might help improve it. But the limitations is meant to be the qualifier, and it's a huge endeavor. You have to, I mean, it's basically saying that you have to be sufficiently versed with this new technology, or to make yourself sufficiently versed so you understand how it can be applied and how it should not be applied. And that sometimes, especially with a new technology, I think is a particular challenge. You have to understand the appropriateness of the tool for the situation that you're applying to.
Absolutely. And that is not done by relying on somebody telling you. It's not a matter of your boss saying use this AI to do this problem. It's a matter of you being personally responsible as the professional
Mhm.
to be competent in using the tools and resources that you have to answer the questions you've been charged to answer. And of course, as we both know, you do that by attending conferences and being and continuing your education and continuing to grow and recognizing that, as I've already at least suggested, if not stated clearly, that the techniques and methodologies we used 30 years ago are probably not appropriate today, that there's a better way.
Mhm.
And the promise is that, as you suggested, through the collaboration of people and devices, tools, we can actually design better. Uh, the way I've said it so many times, new methods, new materials, new approaches to solve new problems. Instead of relying on 19th century technology updated in the 20th century to try and address what we have to deal with in the 21st century, and
Mhm.
hence the name of the podcast. I'm trying to move people out of the last century. We're a quarter of the way through the 21st century, and we're still
Wow.
doing way too much the way we did. AI and all the factors that are coming into play in the use of AI is going to be part of that. And one of those factors, and one of the key audience members that we talk to and work with on a regular basis, is the young engineer, the individual that's fresh out of school, is trying to develop their expertise, find their place within whatever work environment it may be, academic, municipal, consulting, construction, research. It's just there's a plethora of ways engineers are going to work today, uh, but finding their way. And part of that's going to be implementing AI. Any thoughts about how the new generation is much better prepared in some ways and not prepared at all in others as far as moving into this new career they're moving into?
I I think it's an exciting I think it's an exciting and extremely good opportunity. So I will say, when you were talking about this, I recently attended a session myself on AI, and the a comment was made that humans aren't going to be replaced by AI, but humans might be replaced by humans who are adept at AI. So so it was
Excellent.
it was it
Well
was
put.
Thank you. Well, it wasn't my
Yeah,
language, but it was basically that charge that you need to understand that this is going to be a part of your career path going forward. And so familiarizing with yourself with these tools is the career asset that builds you. Again, that is the resume builder. That is the tool that's going to equip you to practice in the years to come. And so yes, it may be a challenge, but and I think and again, I think generation, are, I'm somewhat of a Luddite myself, and I'm not an early adopter of technology, but I do believe, even just from my kids and and younger students, I think that they have the skill set and the framework to be adept at it, and so they really just have to take that leap, and do their diligence to make sure they're ready to embrace this new technology.
And I couldn't agree more. I have said many times over the past several years, both in with ASCE platforms and other platforms, that I think the opportunity for those people early in their career, mid-level in their career,
Mhm.
is to become change agents within the profession, and you do that by becoming a subject area expert. And this is one of those subjects.
Mhm.
Embracing it, becoming an expert in it, understanding the positives and negatives, the limits and opportunities, and then the second part of that is becoming a leader, a servant leader, as I've often said. But the idea is be that change agent and use these resources of both leadership and knowledge, expertise to move your way into and move the opportunities forward, resolve things in a way that makes it better for everybody. And I actually believe that's an obligation personally, in that, again, we're supposed to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the public. And you do that by not doing what we did last year just because it seemed to work.
Mhm.
We do what we do tomorrow because we know it will work. And that's a real challenge. That's really to wrap up. Are there any thoughts, any last comments you'd like to throw out? A QR code for joining ASCE or anything like that?
Oh, yeah, I should have had one handy. I would have, yeah. You missed that opportunity, I'm afraid. Thank
That's all
you.
right.
No,
www.asce.org. It's easy to
I
find.
yeah, I'll start with a plug for. I mean, my articles aren't. This is the anti-ASE plug in a way, but my articles aren't restricted to members.
Sure.
I cannot say enough about the value of case studies. I just, and I think Watson, the Watson for Oncology case study, is a great example of the things that people should watch out for. And that's just one of many case studies that are out there. There are resources that will help you to make sure you're asking the right questions if you're in a situation where you've been asked to do something like adopt something that you're not comfortable with. So taking the time to ask those ethical questions, and thank you for giving me a platform to plug this, is going to help you throughout your practice, regardless of what age or what your practice is.
Yeah. Ironically, I guess because of my theoretical and hypotheoretical background, I always struggled with case studies. It was like, but maybe well, it was the fact that I was always trying to get down to the
Mhm,
core, the nubbins, as it were,
mhm,
and but I'm gonna come back on this and say that part of that also was because of the diversity of background experiences I had coming into the conversation,
mhm,
and I have found, as you've suggested, that when you don't have the experience, when you haven't worked in that environment, when you haven't seen things,
mhm,
and in the same regard, maybe you've had a very limited perspective. So maybe we need to have another facet, another viewpoint on that same issue. Case studies do a really good job of saying, oh, I didn't know that could have gone on. Oh, I didn't realize somebody could have done that or thought that or may have been feeling that. And so the empathy that one develops by inspecting, reviewing, internalizing what comes from a case study, I think is really valuable. And it also establishes, I think, some real fertile ground to develop and grow that ethical construct that we all need to have. Ethics isn't about following rules. It's about doing the right thing, which just happen to be outlined in the rules that we follow. So,
and you
developing that ethical understanding and embracing it, internalizing it, as I've said so many times already, is I think important, and I think the work you do really helps.
Well, thank you so much. And you've just illustrated what we meant by saying that having multiple viewpoints is a better way to inform yourself going forward. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, Tara, I wish I could do more than say thank you, but I I thank you.
With a true
At
pleasure.
least.
So yes, no need
Next
to
time,
thank you.
next time I
Really
see you
enjoyed.
at an ASCE conference, maybe I'll treat you to a drink at the bar,
Sounds wonderful.
whatever it may be.
Have a great rest
But
of your.
nevertheless, I truly thank you. And for those that took time to listen to Tara and our conversation today, I thank you too. The goal here is to empower you to be the best version of an engineer, the best version of a civil infrastructure professional. For those of you that aren't engineers, licensed or otherwise, so that at the end of the day, we're all working together to make a better world, to improve the human condition, and at the same time, once again, consistently protect the health, safety, and welfare of the public first and foremost in everything that we do. With that, until next time, be safe, be well, and take care of each other.
Thanks for listening to the latest episode of the Infrastructure Network.